In this case study, we'll walk through a few short tasks that I hope will give you some inspiration as to how you can use ChatGPT to help you with data analysis. With OpenAI making updates to these tools so frequently, it's hard to stay on top of all of the capabilities that they have. We'll look at examples where you can pass a table of data, fill in missing data, perhaps clean the data set and remove rows that have missing data. We can use ChatGPT to help us interpret charts and graphs, or to pull data from an image or directly from a web page. And finally, we can even do our analysis inside ChatGPT itself. ChatGPT knows how to write Python code, and so I'll show you how to upload data into ChatGPT, perform our exploratory data analysis in there, and even how to extract the Python code so we can use it in our own analysis. In the downloaded files, you will find a single Excel file. That Excel file is what we're going to work through in each of the tasks. In each task, I've documented any data that you might need, as well as the steps I want you to follow. So that's detailed in the same way for each task. Some are more detailed than others. For some of the tasks, we'll be referring to a website. And for all of them, you'll need to have ChatGPT open in a different window so that we can interact with it, pass it data, ask it to look at different websites, and ask it all sorts of questions about data analysis. As we go through each task, find the relevant tab, have a go at the task yourself if you like, before watching my solution. The alternative is to watch me go through it first, and then by all means have a go yourself. Now, interacting with these language tools does mean that we'll all get slightly different results, so don't worry about that. The goal here is to experiment with these tools, learn what they're capable of, and learn how their functionality is changing over time. I'm going to start simple with this inventory analysis example. We have a table of data. We have this column for inventory turnover. I don't know the formula. I need to look it up. And I'm also going to ask ChatGPT to identify a potential problem with this data that may rely on a bit more domain knowledge in this case. So let's take the table, copy it, and paste it into ChatGPT. Now, in the text editor, when I ask a question, it's not immediately obvious that ChatGPT has interpreted this as a table. So let's see what happens if we ask it to do so. Please place this data into a table. So with this returned table of data, I can see that it has interpreted my data correctly. I can expand that table, download its contents. I can select columns, rows, and the whole table if I want to copy it. Now I'm asking, what is the formula for inventory turnover? So the formula makes use of total COGS, beginning inventory, and ending inventory. So let's see if we can get it to write the formula to put back into Excel. My data is in the following columns: COGS, H, beginning inventory, C, end inventory, F. The first data row is row 7. Write a formula for inventory turnover. Let's copy that, place it back in Excel, and before we press enter, we can quickly audit that the formula is referencing the correct cells. So we can copy that formula down, and there we have our answer. So let's find out what the potential issue is. This time I'm going to ask it to take on a particular role. Act as a senior inventory analyst. What issues might you investigate after looking at this data at a glance? All right, it's given me a lot of ideas here, so let's ask it to prioritize. What is the highest priority issue you would investigate? So the highest priority issue to investigate would be the significant increase in ending inventory throughout the year. So we can see in this column that ending inventory has risen dramatically from 500 to 9,500. So the amount of inventory that we're stocking seems to be rising and be somewhat out of control. So that would be the first thing we should investigate. So all sorts of things we've done in this task, from copying data from Excel, interacting with a table here in ChatGPT, writing formulas, asking for action items, and prioritizing those items as well. All sorts of things we can do there. Let's have a look through this next task on restaurant data analysis. Again, I want you to use ChatGPT or another tool of your choice to try and answer the questions and complete the tasks. There's a variety of things for us to do here. So here's a table of data for a high-end steak and sushi restaurant business. They've been open for 6 months, and they've asked you to help finish off their analysis of revenue and costs, as they're having some trouble. The restaurant is open for approximately 130 hours a month and has 50 seats. And there are some problems with the profit numbers which need to be resolved. Scanning across the table, this seems to be because revenue is in different units, it's in thousands, and these formulas, I guess, are not accounting for that. So let's copy this data into ChatGPT. Again, let's display the data as a table. Okay, so we've got a table of data there that we can work with. Now, I'm going to click on the revenue column here, which makes it appear in my next prompt. So ChatGPT is going to know that I'm referring to this column. Replace the values in this revenue column. I need them to not be in thousands. Okay, great. So we've got revenue now appearing in dollars as opposed to thousands of dollars. So that makes it consistent with the rest of the table. Let's highlight these two columns now, the two profit columns. Recalculate the profit columns based on the corrected revenue data. So we can expand that to take a look, and this is looking much better. Now, we were asked what R and U might mean in context of a restaurant business. I'm not sure. Let's ask. What might the category R and U refer to in the context of a restaurant business? So it suggested repairs and utilities, but that actually makes me think of rent and utilities. So potentially some ambiguity there, and that's something I can't solve here. I'm going to need to go and speak to the source of the data to find out what this column means. I think it probably means rent and utilities. So that's a good example of where AI can't know everything because it doesn't know how the data was created. Finally, we were asked to add a metric called RevPASH to the table. Now, I'm not a restaurateur. I have no idea what RevPASH is, so let's find out. What does the RevPASH formula calculate? Okay, so it sounds like it's a productivity metric used in the restaurant business, and it assesses how well a restaurant is utilizing its seating capacity over a given amount of time. To calculate it, we need available seat hours, which in itself is calculated from number of seats and number of opening hours. So let's give it that information and ask for that data to be added. The restaurant has 50 seats and is open for 130 hours per month. Please add RevPASH column to the table. Finally, the owner asked us to investigate the labor costs. Now, she mentions that the labor costs here seem to be very high compared to her old McDonald's franchise. So let's ask ChatGPT to use its wider knowledge here. Are these labor costs representative of what you might expect for a high-end steak and sushi restaurant? And what would equivalent numbers be for a McDonald's? In just a few sentences, ChatGPT can give me a bit of background knowledge to help me understand this new domain. High-end restaurants typically have higher labor costs due to more specialized staff. Labor costs might range from 30 to 40% of total revenue, whereas in a McDonald's, they might range from 20 to 25. So we've got a good explanation there as to why those values might differ. So that gives us everything we need to answer the questions for this task. We've passed ChatGPT some data, we've gained some domain knowledge in trying to analyze something, we've discovered a formula for a metric in this specific domain, and we've helped fix and clean some data errors in the table.
Continue learning. Join CFI today.